This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the AIPIS show for accredited income property investment specialists and those who aspire to be. If you're a real estate, mortgage, or financial professional, this is the place for you. We'll explore innovative investment analysis, sales, marketing, and income-generating strategies for the most historically proven wealth creator, income property. Learn from the experts as they show you how to build a better business and a better life.
It is my pleasure to welcome Efren Delgado to the show. He is a former FBI agent, and he's the author of The Opposite is True: How You Can Discover the Unexpected Enemies, Allies, and a Purpose Through the Eyes of Counterintuitive Psychology. I think this is going to be a fascinating show. Welcome, Efren. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Good. It's good to have you on. Tell us about your experience with the FBI and how you came to write the book.
So I joined the FBI in January 2000, so good way to start that.
Right before 9/11, in other words, you're saying, right?
Right, exactly. And specifically in the National Security Division in Washington, D.C. So 9/11 and one of our biggest espionage cases in history happened in the next year in 2001. Mm-hmm. So 2001 was definitely an intense year, but I spent half my time chasing spies and terrorists under the national security umbrella of the FBI. And then the second half of my FBI career in the more traditional criminal division, working civil rights cases, which is less traditional, but at least they were criminal cases.
Civil rights violations, you mean?
Yes. So that encompasses hate crimes, human trafficking, and color of law, essentially criminal cops with rusty badges, but the official name, the legal name is color of law.
Oh, so that's kind of like an internal affairs kind of concept almost, right?
Almost. Internal affairs is what police departments use for administrative investigations, not their criminal investigations.
Oh, God.
So what's interesting about that little anecdote on a little bit of getting in the weeds legally, if they're using administrative investigative tools and interviews and evidence, we can't use that in our criminal investigation because there's a violation there.
Right.
We have to keep them separate legally. But that's a little bit in the weeds. But in general, my criminal division experience was the latter half of my FBI career, which was human trafficking, which everybody kind of has an idea of, modern day slavery.
Right.
Hate crimes, which is an emotion-based violence crime. And then color of law, which I spent most of my time exonerating good officers of false allegations. Mm-hmm. But when they were guilty, I'd say 1% to 2% of the time, they were significantly guilty. So I look for a pattern of systemic criminal behavior.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Even the good cops knew who they were.
It's really important to keep the cops honest. Definitely.
Most of them are honest, for the record.
Yeah. Good to hear. Yeah. So, Efren, with the book, I want you to talk about the premise of the book, if you would. And is it what most people would just commonly sort of refer to as reverse psychology, or this isn't that, right? This isn't how to motivate someone with reverse psychology. This is digging into the psychology of that person and how what you see on the surface is really not the way they are, right?
Yeah, I think the latter half of how you describe that is really what it is. On the surface, everybody presents a nice book cover, including the bad guys. But what I found in my personal experience and my professional experience in the spy world, in the criminal world, in the family Christmas dinner world, all the way to my coworkers and social friendship world, is the bad guys, the bullies, the tyrants, the Hitlers, the not so nice neighbors. They all have that one fundamental problem. And that's an inner insecurity, like an empty bucket that they're trying to fill with a bunch of Band-Aids of feeling good for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so the way they feel good, that little dopamine rush of power, is oppressing other people in big ways or little ways. So I compare the bad guys, the criminals, the bullies, all those not so nice people, like chihuahuas barking at the doorbell. Mm-hmm. The chihuahua's barking not because it's brave and strong and courageous. It's barking because it's scared of whatever's on the other side is going to know that they're frail, weak, and vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So that's what criminals do. Ironically, criminals get good at their bullying, their oppression, and they also get rewarded by it because they intimidate people, they scare people, and they have these short wins of money, sex, violence, whatever those dopamine rushes are for the bad guys. those reward them. But the good guys in general, this is why my book is kind of the counterintuitive truths. The opposite is true. The good guys are brave enough to risk investments, to risk being an entrepreneur, to risk being vulnerable to family members, to risk falling in love. All those things that the bad guys are envious of the good guys. So on the surface, bad guys are scary, good guys are little rabbits, little mice. But in reality, the good guys, your audience, my reader, are brave enough to live life, frankly, to risk living life. Doesn't mean we just kind of dismiss the bad guys. They're still dangerous and scary. But knowing that your audience, knowing that they're stronger than the criminals, than the tyrants, and the fraudsters, should empower them, encourage them to go for it and to trust your instincts. I have a whole chapter on instinct and a whole chapter on how power is a natural corrupter unless you insert humility. But in a nutshell, you could kind of see why I titled it The Opposite is True.
Right, right. So what do we do when we encounter one of these people who's bullying us or taking advantage of us, oppressing us, whatever? I got to tell you, there was even remember the old show Frasier, there was even an episode about this, homeowners associations.
Yeah.
It seems like the homeowners association always attracts this power hungry guy or gal with the Napoleon complex or whatever it is, right? They're just like, oh my gosh, it's people would definitely say that's a place where a lot of them land because, it's a volunteer position. There's usually no competition for the little election and so forth. But how do we deal with these people? Is it, get in their face and tell them off? Or is it, what do you do? How do you deal with them?
That's a good question. First of all, what's funny is you pointed out the HOA president type of position. And I literally specified that as an example in my book because it's such a low-hanging fruit example that almost everybody can recognize. So I think the point I was making when I gave that example is that power comes in many forms. This is my chapter 16, where I claim the bold statement that power is a natural corrupter unless you have one antidote, and that antidote is humility, which is counterintuitive. But if you insert humility like Marcus Aurelius did, the emperor of Rome back in the day, the most powerful guy on the planet, you will not succumb to corruption. But any kind of power without humility will corrupt you. And power comes in the form of money, authority, a gun, political position, good looks, whatever advantage you have, being elected HOA president, whatever that power is, you will 100% be corrupted by it, I claim, unless you humble yourself with it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think it was Voltaire that said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? That's the old saying.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was Abraham Lincoln. He said, if you want to test a man's character, give him power.
In the real estate game, we love leverage because we can do more with less. If you're in the active side of the real estate business, like wholesaling or flipping, great software offers even more leverage because it solves problems like lead tracking, marketing, sales, and even operations. That's where our sponsor RE Simply comes in, like list stacking, driving for dollars, automated drip campaigns, cold calling dialer, complete phone system, email management, speed to lead, buyer management, task tracking, accounting, and so much more. This powerhouse software eliminates the need for juggling multiple subscriptions and different complicated integrations. So check out RE Simply if you want to streamline your investing business and start closing more deals. They made a special discount offer for my followers where you get 50% off your first month at resimply.com/Hartman. That's resimpli.com/Hartman. Plus, they're throwing in a 14-day free trial, so don't miss out. Take a look today.
So it just reveals...
My question is, what do we do about it? How do we deal with these people that are on the power trip?
So keeping in mind the example I gave of the Chihuahua barking at the doorbell, those aggressors are so scared of being checked, of being challenged, that you challenge them, you check them. First of all, the first step is don't make yourself target. So the way to avoid making yourself target is don't look weaker, because then they won't target you. Mm-hmm. So if you're standing tall, if you're walking strong, if you're being confident, there's less of a chance you'll be targeted by an oppressor. Mm-hmm. For example, fraudsters trying to rip off people from their life savings, they're not calling experts from Wall Street or entrepreneurs and investors like yourself. They're calling senile people and trying to rob them of their savings. Yeah. They're trying to manipulate them because they're easy targets. If they were to learn that the person on the other line actually knew what they were doing, they were strong, they knew the ins and outs of investing, of business, they would just hang up the phone and move on. Mm-hmm. Same with like a darker example is of a pedophile. They're not targeting the popular kid surrounded by kids playing with the ball and laughing. They're targeting the quiet kid alone kicking rocks, maybe even whimpering. So that should encourage your audience that if you make yourself stronger, present yourself not as a victim, you will be less victimized.
Okay, so that covers prevention. Okay, so right. Don't look weak, right? That's easy. What do we do though if we have the encounter, or we've got to maybe deal with these people on an ongoing basis? Hopefully not, but what do you do then? Well,
trust your instincts. The other vulnerability humans have is we're addicted to comfort, and denial is a perfect access for comfort. So if you're willing to live in reality, trust your gut and whatever your gut's telling you, like this is a bad person, or I've got a funny feeling about this deal, or there's red flags popping up about this relationship, business deal, or company, or whatever it is. If you're doing your due diligence and you see those red flags, the number one thing is don't be in denial about it. Mm-hmm. Accept them. And that sounds obvious, but emotion and logic don't mix. That's a whole other section in my book. But the fact that emotion and logic don't mix is everything. If your fears and discomforts are ruling your decisions, you're going to become a victim. But if you pause, take a breath, and think about things analytically, dispassionately, you can actually assess what those red flags are and verify if they're true or not. Instinct is one thing, but you have to verify. So that would be the second step, I would say.
Because at the beginning, it sounded like your suggestion was to go right at them and to, just call their bluff, in other words.
That's the prevention step.
Well, no. This is not prevention. I'm talking about during the encounter. Okay. Where, you're dealing with something and just you don't back down. It sounded like that's what you were saying. But, of course, that could be risky because they could be dangerous.
Right. Well, it depends on what the context is. Are we talking about somebody who's going to rip you off in a business deal or somebody who's going to potentially shoot a weapon in a restaurant?
You never know,
So that brings up another point that I think you've discussed this in different ways with a lot of your guests without actually saying it. But context always matters. Sure. I think in one of your episodes, you were discussing the Richard Nixon speech in the early 70s, right. And then the Apollo moon landing in 1969 and all that high readership, and then compared it to the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. But you made the point that this is only relevant per capita.
Right.
At the time, there were less people.
Yep.
And now, so proportion matters. So what really is going on there is context matters. So if we're talking about a business deal, you're wanting to preserve your investment, your investors, your partners, that's the priority. If we're talking about physical safety, things shift. And so my mantra overall in the book that I illustrate in different ways is assess, adapt, overcome. Mm-hmm. And assessing implies thinking, which means not emoting. So whatever the red flags is, whatever the triggers are, analyze them dispassionately. And as your intelligent audience can do, break it down and address it in reality, not with denial and comfort. So that's number one. And because your audience is intelligent, they know what they're doing. So be confident with that. I'm encouraging them with that. Adapt. So whatever the conclusion, it's good, bad, whatever, even if it's uncomfortable, adapt to it. We're getting out of this deal. Oh, we've invested all this money. Okay, we don't want to invest more. Get out of the deal. Oh, but I've known them for 30 years. That's emotional. That's irrelevant to the. So start living in reality, objectivity, dispassion. That's the adapt to it. And then overcome it. Choose before you ever face the problem that you're going to win. Mm-hmm. You're already choosing to be a winner, allowing you to be a winner. Don't let mommy, daddy issues affect your success, which is a real thing. Success syndrome exists. When people survive terrorist attacks, they often feel guilty about it, which is emotional, but it's irrational. Mm-hmm. And the same is true for success. Allow yourself to win. Allow yourself to profit because you're going to do good with the money. You're going to do well with your success. If your audience succeeds, society succeeds. So we could always remember that from a success point of view. Assess, adapt, overcome.
I like it that you're taking this into the investing world. And I'd like you to maybe address, because so much of our life nowadays, our lives are online, right? And I get trolled a bit by these people who think the market is going to crash all the time. And my view is that the market is actually much better than they think. And, it's certainly not perfect, but it's much better than they think. And so they're constantly commenting on, my YouTube videos or whatever. And they're saying, oh, this interview won't age well, right? Or, Hartman is wrong. He's just talking his book, all this kind of stuff, right? And what I realized is that after kind of looking into some of these people and, even talking to some of them, is that they are so angry with themselves because of their own lack of self-confidence. They didn't have the guts to pull the trigger and put down the cash and commit to an investment years ago. And they missed out over and over and over again. And they're just mad. That's what I determined after dealing with some of these people. It's kind of like, listen, I've been this guy that I'm about to describe. So just for full disclosure, it's kind of like the guy who met or saw the pretty girl and didn't do anything about it, right? Didn't go up and talk to her, didn't have confidence, right? And then he makes up all these like stories about her, like, oh, she probably wasn't very good anyway, whatever,
right.
She's probably a loser, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Like, and that's exactly what these people are doing with real estate investments.
Right.
They're doing the same exact thing, but they turn into like these angry trolls,
right.
And you see this behavior on Facebook, particularly, and I hate to say it, but it's political. You see it a lot from the left side of the political aisle because these people feel that they missed out. They didn't take the chance. They didn't start their own business. And so they're like the victim of the system, right?
Right.
And the system isn't giving them as much as they want. So they're bitter about it. And they think big government is supposed to rescue them from this, right? So you make a Facebook post and they're just violently hostile. I mean, just trying to have a discussion here. And it's just crazy, the overreaction you get sometimes.
That violent hostility reflects the opposite is true. One of the big points I make in the book, your examples were describing a lot of the things I cover in the book. Mm-hmm. And the louder the picture without the appropriate context, the more the opposite is true. People are projecting. Yeah. So if somebody's screaming at the top of their lungs about a certain position, they probably feel the opposite or they're intimidated by the opposite. And people fear one thing. They don't fear sharks, cobras, or terrorists. They actually fear the unknown. Mm-hmm. The people who are least afraid of sharks are like surfers or, aquatic scientists. The people least afraid of cobras are people interacting with cobras who probably get stung a lot more than anybody else. But the point is they're experienced with those things, so they don't fear them. People who fear investing the least are investors because they have experience. Public speaking is the classic one.
Right.
So back to the main pillar that emotion and logic don't mix. When everybody's so scared of living life, they're going to be envious, jealous, angry at those who are risking living life, taking those risks, taking failures, learning from them, and thriving. That's envy. And envy, I think, is one of the most common sins of the world because most people, frankly, don't want truth. They want comfort. Mm-hmm. And one way they bask in their comfort in the midst of a bunch of people afraid to risk is groupthink. They go arm in arm together. Hey, let's just go have a drink or let's go on vacation. Just distract instead of setting long-term goals, chopping them into short-term goals, accomplishing one bit at a time, celebrating the short accomplishments, failing, learning from the failure, readdressing their trajectory and climbing the mountain again. All that is work. All that is hassle.
Right.
And when the people in their lives are doing the same thing to them, oh, do you think you're better than us? You're going to go better yourself, take that class? Mm-hmm. Oh, you think you're better than our family because you think you could invest in real estate, buy a duplex, and not go on vacation with us for 2 years, but you're saving your money because you think you're better than that kind of logic. Yeah, it's not logic. They're emoting. Yeah. So all those trolls bugging you.
Misery loves company, as the old saying goes.
Misery loves company. Yeah. And they'll go over the cliff in a herd, arm in arm, as long as we're together, all the way down. They'll feel good. And when you were describing all those different people, you used the word feel a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's true. You're recognizing all these patterns on an unconscious level like we do, but you've already assessed the principles in my book without articulating the principles. What I do in my book is I lay out all those observations you insightfully made, but about life, about risk, about criminals, about tyrants, about HOA presidents. And they all say the same thing.
AKA tyrants.
Exactly. There's probably a few Marcus Aurelius HOA presidents out there, but they're few and far between. But that's what makes winners by definition special, I think, because they're willing to risk, they're willing to sacrifice, they're willing to support, people who are suffering with their investments. They're the ones building the wells in Africa and other places that don't have clean water. They're the ones building homes for these poor people around the world. I guess the biggest altruistic people are successful people, because if you don't have time or money to help others, you can't help anybody.
Yeah.
And if you're a parasite for the government, there's no way you're ever going to help anybody. You're never going to get out of that.
Yeah.
And I personally think, not to get all conspiratorial, but I personally think those few in power like it that way. Mm-hmm. They want the proletariat dependent and emotional and not thinking.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah.
If they're happy with throwing bread at the Coliseum and thank you for the bread, or in the 1920s when they were giving shoes away for elections, or in the not so distant past when they're giving cell phones away for votes.
Yep.
You're being grateful for scraps.
Right.
And if people are emotionally grateful for scraps, they're not going to stop and think, because emotion and logic don't mix. They're not going to question the system, which hurts them. The opposite is true. They're enemies pretending to be their friend. That's why on the cover, I made that serpent beautiful. But if you get close, that's actually what the bad guys are doing.
Uh-huh.
They're trying to pull you off your path. So the cover of my book illustrates a lot once you kind of dig into the weeds, but it's cyclical.
Sure.
Whatever long-term goals your audience has, it's like climbing a mountain to get to the summit. It's hard.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to climb that mountain. And here's the irony. You'll eventually slip, but fruit grows in valleys, not on mountaintops. The water is on the bottom. So there's flowers and fruits of wisdom there. Instead of saying, screw the world, I give up, my dad was right, or my cousin was right, trying to keep you down, you're going to pick up that fruit, nourish yourself, and resume your climb with a more wise trajectory. The only path to wisdom is humility.
So in other words, enjoy the slip, because you're going to slip. But you benefit from it, because that's where the lush vegetation is and so forth. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think enjoying the slip might be strong, because nobody likes humility.
Yeah,
it sucks.
Right.
But when you enjoy the benefits of humility, which is the wisdom, the scar tissue is stronger than the original silky skin.
Yeah.
So you don't want, as soft and smooth as baby skin is, you don't want that in your 40s. You do not want silky baby skin in your 40s. You want scar tissue, because that shows grit, resilience, and you're going to thrive with that extra strength.
Yeah. Well, it's, of course, stronger too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's all connected.
Yeah. So give us maybe, just a couple of quick surprising things from the book or your experience at the FBI that might surprise people. I mean, I don't think anyone's surprised that a bully, and a little dog, their bark is worse than their bite, right?
Right.
We've all come to learn that eventually, right? Anything that would really surprise us, or, insights we can gain into other people, understanding them. I mean, everybody's fascinated by like those profiler shows and how they profile people and so forth. Whatever.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think what would surprise people is my chapter 13 describes this is what I call negative Nancy's. And there are bad guys in your own, I alluded to this, in your own workplace, in the FBI, in hospitals, in the CIA, in your own family, that we deny because they're on our team. They're supposed to be helping us.
Yeah. We have a name for them. We have a name for them. We call them onboard terrorists.
Onboard terrorists. I love that. I call them negative Nancy's.
Yeah, right.
And I essentially describe them how I describe the bad guys, except with the caveat. Well, I guess bad guys in general are cowards, so they cloak themselves. But in general, they feign benevolence. They feign friendship. Right. But the red flags to look out for these people who, even your audience is right now probably thinking of some people that they're trying to push out because they're in denial about it. My family can't be like that. My best friend for 40 years can't be like that. The reality is your instincts are right. So trust your instinct. Don't be in denial, just like a bad investment or a corrupt potential partner. Trust your gut and assess it objectively, because another principle I refer to is association osmosis. Put boundaries up for the people who are negative and embrace the people who are positive, because no matter what, the people you hang out with are going to rub off on you. People understand that. But remember that in your own personal experience. So in the FBI, there were absolutely people who are against winners, against productive people who are out trying to protect people. And they're trying to bring you down. Why? Because of envy. They're so busy polishing their own badge as opposed to using that energy for catching the bad guys, protecting innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
But the same is true for people who went to medical school, who are lawyers, who are successful investors. Envy is a human emotional thing. And there are weak people in all of these quote unquote high successful positions. And that is the unexpected thing. Yeah. So that's one. I would just beg your audience to be objective and dispassionate when it comes to trusting your instincts. Just trust them and assess them appropriately. Maybe they're wrong, but
it's good advice, of course, Efren. It's just hard to do it in the moment.
Right. Yeah, because emotion and logic don't mix.
Right. Of course. Good stuff. Well, give out your website. Tell people where they can learn more about it. The book is available, of course, at all the usual places.
Right. All usual places. Amazon's a quick one to go to. It's efrendelgado.com. You could find all the links to your favorite book retailer, and you can learn more about me and where I'll be speaking, or if you need a speaker or interested in having a speaker for your company, I'm happy to do that too. There's a contact link there. So yeah, efrendelgado.com.
All right, Efren. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been fun. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.